There's a really cool opportunity for you guys to actually share with the World Economic Forum how you're using this tool with your students and even potentially get highlighted on their platform to share some of the really cool use cases that educators from around the world are using to introduce this concept of systems thinking and the platform to help students make more informed decisions, and in our case, about life after high school and their potential kind of career exploration journey. So it's a really cool use case that WEF is excited to introduce into their platform as well. Um, for those of you who I haven't met before, my name is Damien. I'm director of special projects with my Blueprint. And really, that's a fancy way of saying what I'm trying to focus on these days is figuring out how to add value to our school board partners. We have hundreds of school boards across Canada who license my Blueprint to help their students make more informed decisions about life after high school. As great, amazing, wonderful as the tool is, there's no such thing as a one-stop shop, especially today, right? So I'm trying to figure out what are ways above and beyond just using the tool that we can support you in your goals towards helping students feel more confident and ready to take on the world. And that's why we have Brianne here today. I was lucky, fortunate enough to get to meet Brianne probably a year ago now
Yeah.
and
Yep.
learn about the work they were doing with strategic intelligence and building out the academy, and immediately made a connection when entering this role that this is something we need to put in front of our community of educators across Canada to figure out how to incorporate this into classroom. So that's the goal of today. We are just going to have a quick primer before we get into the actual tool to have Brianne kind of explain in general and within the context of education what systems thinking is. But then we're going to explore the tool and hopefully leave today with all of you understanding how you can start to play around with it yourselves, how you can get students exploring it. And then that opportunity will come back to about how you can actually get featured on the World Economic Forum site, talking about how you've been using it with students. So without further ado, Brianne, you okay just to kind of introduce yourself, maybe touch on the educator background that you're coming to this with and kind
Sure.
of what you've been working on so hard lately?
Thank you so much for having me, Damien. It's really a pleasure to see you again. It's always fun when we chat. I think the last time you and I chatted, we were supposed to have a 20-minute conversation and it lasted for an hour. So, it's always fruitful to have those conversations with like-minded people. But yeah, so let's just begin. I want to quickly tell you a little bit about myself. And I think what's really important here is that while I do work at the World Economic Forum, I was a teacher first. So I know where everybody, how I know the landscape. I know how hard it is to be a teacher. I know what teachers and staff have to deal with every day because I was there on the front lines too. So when I make choices in my research, I'm always thinking from the teacher first. How are they going to implement this in the classroom? Because I started there. So that's really important, I think. So I'm not an outsider coming in and telling you, I think you know what exactly what I know exactly what you should do, but I've never taught. I've taught. So that's an important note. But currently I'm a PhD candidate at Trinity College Dublin in the School of Computer Science and Statistics. And I'm also a researcher at the World Economic Forum. So I'm a research fellow there. And I've had 10 years experience in the classroom, and I also have media experience from even prior to that as well. But my specialties are really systems thinking and learning and media bias, fake news, misinformation, disinformation, and educational technologies. I don't know if anybody out there has seen it. I'm not going to play the video, but I just want to start this off by saying, I got into this field right now. The reason I'm at Trinity College Dublin doing my PhD is because, as a teacher, I witnessed lots of things happen in the classroom that just shocked me, and that this one really, really kind of sticks with me. I had played, and let me just tell you about basically the time that I unintentionally spread misinformation to an entire senior class at Danbury High School in Connecticut. And I accidentally started a conspiracy theory that Mark Zuckerberg was a CIA agent. So completely unintentional. But I was trying to teach the students about satire. And satire is a really hard concept for students to understand. I didn't realize this at the time because I was a relatively new teacher. And it was, 18-year-old students. So they were older. So I thought they'd just be able to get it. And I showed him this video from The Onion. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with The Onion at all, but basically it was a little faux newscast that was really funny. And it kind of talked about how when you're on Facebook, you're encouraged to share everything about yourself, like who your friend groups are, what events you're going to. And this is great for, the CIA, because now the CIA can identify terrorists and their terrorist networks and their terrorist groups, and they know where they're going to be. So it was a kind of funny video that was poking fun at how we overshare. Now, when you watch the video, you can't even I couldn't even understand how the students didn't get it, but not one student actually realized that it was a fake newscast. Every student thought it was real. And I had no idea. I was so flabbergasted. I didn't know what to say. And right then and there, I was like, wow, this is a big, big problem. If all of these students believe everything that they see, where is this going to take us as a society? And this was back in 2015, I think is when I showed this video. So this was a little while ago. And now we can kind of see what's happened, right? So, just to talk, it starts off, social media, for example, is a problem in the sense that it's the least trusted news source globally, but at the same time, more than 50% of people say they use it to get their news. That's a problem. And then furthermore, you have excuse me, Newsworks study in 2022 indicated that over 80% of people in the UK regularly come across fake news, with 52% admitting that they've been deceived by it once. So we have all these people that know the information that they're getting is probably not good, but they're still going there anyways to get this news. So what do we do about it? And I see a lot of talk about putting, the Band-Aid, like a fake news checker in place. But to me, that's just putting a Band-Aid on a problem. It's not actually addressing the problem. And the problem is that students nowadays just don't know how to comprehend really, really complex systems, complex topics. Our world is more complex than it ever was before. And this is a really systemic problem. So when I started working at the World Economic Forum, I started researching basically how can we help students understand complexity. And one of the risks that the World Economic Forum just identified as the top short-term risk is misinformation and disinformation. This is the top short-term risk that our society faces. So therefore, we wrote a paper called Innovative Learning Solutions to Navigate Complexity. It was a white paper that was produced by the World Economic Forum last year, and it talked about how systems thinking can be a tool and a framework in which we use in the classrooms that can help students overcome this struggle to understand complexity. So basically, I love this little graphic. So basically, at the heart of all of this, misinformation and disinformation are part of the problem, but it's a bigger problem than that. And the problem really lies at the heart of people don't understand complexity. We don't know how to understand these really complex topics. So when you look at the screen, you could see that traditional thinking is very, very linear, when systems thinking is much more dynamic. And when you look at the wicked problems of today, like you could see up here, our wicked problems look much more like a systems thinking model than they do a traditional model of thinking. What is systems thinking, though? And I think a lot of people are probably like, okay, I've heard of it, but I don't really know what it is. And I love this graphic because it's really basic and simple to understand. And it really kind of encompasses exactly what systems thinking is. So rather than focusing on the individual parts within a system, your systems thinking encourages you to kind of take a zoom out look and see the object that you're looking at from that zoomed out perspective. By stepping back, it offers you that holistic view. So for example, if you're standing right up in front of the elephant, like you see these people over here, you might think that that leg is a tree or that the ear is a fan. But when you actually zoom out, you see, oh no, these are just parts of the whole, and the whole is the elephant. So it's a different type of way of thinking. You could think of, like, I don't know if people are familiar with design thinking, but that's more, from the zoomed in persona perspective. You go from personas and you build out from there. Systems thinking is more holistic. So you start out and zoom in.
Good.
In the 1950s, the Dayak people of Borneo, an island in Southeast Asia, were suffering from an outbreak of malaria. So they called the World Health Organization for help. The World Health Organization had a ready-made solution, which was to spray copious amounts of DDT around the island. With the application of DDT, the mosquitoes that carried the malaria were knocked down, and so was the malaria. There were some interesting side effects, though. The first was that the roofs of people's houses began to collapse on their heads. Turns out the DDT not only killed off the malaria-carrying mosquitoes, but it also killed a species of parasitic wasp that had controlled a population of thatch-eating caterpillars. Thatch being what the roofs of the Dayak people's homes were made from. Without the wasps, The caterpillars multiplied and flourished and began munching their way through the villagers' roofs. That was just the beginning. The DDT affected a lot of the island's other insects, which were eaten by the resident population of small lizards called geckos. The biological half-life of DDT is around 8 years, so animals like geckos do not metabolize it very fast. It stays in their system for a long time. Over time, the geckos began to accumulate pretty high levels of DDT, and while they tolerated the DDT fairly well, the island's resident cats, which dined on the geckos, did not. The cats ate the geckos, and the DDT contained in the geckos killed the cats. With the cats gone, the island's population of rats came out to play. We all know what happens when rats multiply and flourish. Pretty soon, the Dayak people were back on the phone to the World Health Organization, only this time it wasn't malaria that was the problem. It was the plague and the destruction of their grain stores, both of which were caused by the overpopulation of rats. This time, though, the World Health Organization didn't have a ready-made solution and had to invent one. What did they do? They decided to parachute live cats into Borneo.
True story.
Operation Cat Drop occurred courtesy of the Royal Air Force and eventually stabilized the situation.
So if you don't understand the interrelatedness of things, solutions often cause more problems. That's really the fundamental bit about this. So that's ultimately what systems thinking can help us to prevent. So as I said, people think, oh, the problem with the news that we're getting now is that the news is fake or it's misinformation, disinformation. So we could put a Band-Aid on it, as I said before, the fact checkers, and then it fixes the problem. Well, no, that doesn't fix the problem. The problem is that we don't understand how to really make sense of all the complexity. And therefore, that would be the problem that would have needed to be addressed if you wanted to solve the problem. So that's ultimately what the Strategic Intelligence Academy is here. It's an intervention. Now, we're not saying it's going to solve the problem of our struggle to grasp complexity, but it is a resource for teachers to use to help them in that endeavor with their students. So, for example, media information is really, really complex out there. And when you look at some of the data, it's really scary. An estimated 500,000 deepfakes were shared in 2023, and 90% of the world's data was created in the last 2 years. And that's 402.74 million terabytes of data created daily. So if you were to try to watch all of those videos, let's say it's 100 billion hours of video, that's 11.4 billion years it would take you to do that. So when we tell people, oh, no, you just need to do more research on a topic to understand it better. You need to read more. You need to get yourself more informed. Well, what does that mean? Because look at all the information that's being put out there. That's really, really hard to do. And that's not a simple task. And the fact that we think it's as simple as just reading more or, getting more information about a topic, that's not really the solution either. And then you can look at things like media bias. The media is very, very biased, but that's not always, something that can be fixed because we all have bias. Bias is inherent part of the human condition. So basically, every experience I've had in my own life contributes to the way I feel about certain things. So therefore, eradicating bias entirely from the media is not possible. Every single person on that team has their own life experiences that contribute to the story that's being told. And then there's also, writing style. So the word choice that you use, fact selection, what facts are you selecting? All of these contribute to the bias of a story. So the news is a really complicated system as well. And then also rising complexity. So, we used to be part of an agricultural society where our key resources were lands, the distribution, as you can see here, villages and roads, and the scope was really local. But now we're a knowledge society. That's our resource. And our distribution is digital networks, and the scope is global. So this is much more complex than it ever has been before. The world is all globally interconnected. And that's something that we've really only experienced in the last 30 or so years in the 21st century. And then, of course, educational gaps. As a teacher, I always found it really frustrating when people kept on giving me initiatives And I think I was talking to you about this before, Damien. I like to call it initiative fatigue. You know, in the States, we had the Common Core state standards, and I could think of a billion other things that we were given that we had to learn to teach. And it was an initiative, and we got fed up with it. I'm not trying to say that this is an initiative per se, but it's just a very, very small intervention that you can actually put into your lessons that can make a really big impact. And education really needs an intervention because our system's a bit archaic. It hasn't changed that drastically in the last 100 years, yet our society has significantly changed, as you saw in that graphic, from being agricultural now to global. So we really need to start thinking about what skills we're teaching kids. And also media literacy training is lacking for teachers and students. For example, only 38% of Americans report that they actually learned anything about media messaging in school. To me, that's a huge problem, and that's kind of scary. And we don't really have too many frameworks around the world that have that can help teachers tackle this. You know, a lot of teachers, I remember when I was a teacher, I was once just randomly given a class called media literacy, and I was like, oh, okay, how am I going to teach this? And I had to figure it out myself. And it would be great if I had some resources in order to do that, that were more tried and true, because I was just scourging the internet for anything I could find. And oftentimes we as teachers have to teach those classes that we don't have the expertise in, and that's really difficult to do. All right. So that's really what the Strategic Intelligence platform, or excuse me, Academy is here to do. So like, if you look at this as an entire system, if you were to actually put this small intervention into the system, it can actually have an impact on almost everything. Because if you can change or help people understand complexity a little bit better, it can mitigate all of these other elements within this complex system. So now just to quickly get to like what the platform is, and then we can go into it in a minute. But something that the platform includes that we are kind of looking to collect more of are things like lesson plans, presentations, worksheets. We're looking for educational resources like articles, podcasts, videos, and then also micro-credentials or master classes or webinars and so on and so forth. All of these can be hosted on the platform as well. There's a discussion forum that's going to be coming soon. And also my favorite part about this is the student learner showcase, because, you know, at the forum, we believe in stakeholder capitalism, right? Stakeholders are a really integral part of everything that we do. And in education, the biggest stakeholders really are the kids. They have the most to gain from education. So we really believe that we need to be able to have a platform for them to have their voices be heard, especially when they're utilizing these better thinking skills, both for a motivation for themselves and for other students alike. Yeah, so I'm actually just going to go right here and put this little QR code up, and I don't know, Damien, did I miss anything?
I think that was a solid overview, especially systems thinking. And then just want to reiterate, there's a ton of information on the platform, the Academy as well, about that, and to learn more about systems thinking, like even that video about Borneo, I believe is on
It
the
is,
Academy as
yeah.
well, right? So,
Isn't that a great video?
makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll send the link out to the Academy for everybody who's here, and we're going to promote it to the MyBlueprint community as well. So if you guys aren't able to get your phone out in time, don't worry, we'll be sharing the link with everybody.
Yep. So this is the Strategic Intelligence Academy. We just launched it on Thursday. So it's brand new, just been out. And I'll just take you through the Academy quickly, just so you can get a lay of the land, just to see what it has and what it has to offer, and maybe think about also, while I'm showing this to you, what you might want to contribute. Okay, so this is the homepage. And basically, as I said before, on the little graphic, we have lesson plans, blogs, podcasts, all of these things are available on the platform. Also, we're linked with the Strategic Intelligence platform, which is separate, and I'll go into that in a little bit too, but I'll do that afterwards. So if you look in, for example, teach, all of these are action verbs at the top, because I really wanted it to be action focused. So yeah, the teacher and me calling them action verbs, geez. But yeah, so teach right here. I was an English teacher, could you guess? So these are the lesson plans and the case studies that we have. They're from all over the world. I think we have every continent covered pretty much. And you could see in here too that you can go through them by subject. You can sift through them by their location or by the level. So you might be thinking more, okay, let's look at the secondary schools as opposed to postgraduate education. So you can look at them through that, and you can also kind of filter them through the SDGs as well. And just to give you an example, let's see one that I really like. So this was a pretty cool one. So this is an example of what I was able to do with an organization called Enderun. Excuse me. And let me see if I can actually, can you see this right here?
Yeah, little flow chart.
All right. So let me just start off by saying we met this organization, I think probably in about June. And the first thing I did was I sat with a woman, her name was Loida. She's the director of the Enderun extension. And we said, okay, we want to bring systems thinking to the Philippines. How do we do this? Enderun is a college in the Philippines. So I basically gave her and some of her colleagues a brief introduction to what systems thinking is. I gave them access to our strategic intelligence platform. So it's different than the Strategic Intelligence Academy. They're two separate things. It's confusing. But we gave her access to the Strategic Intelligence platform, which I'll show you in a bit. And then she said, okay, so I'm going to run a workshop in August, the systems thinking workshop, and I will write up a lesson plan and I'll give it to you and you can put it on the platform. So she wrote up this beautiful lesson plan for us. It's actually a 5-day, so it's about like 15 pages, and it's a full 5 days of lessons for the class. And then from that lesson plan, we also got student testimonials. We got a report, so they wrote a white paper. And a really cool thing that happened is during her class, she realized that, and this was like the teacher thing that really made me geek out a little bit and get really excited. But what she found out was an incidental finding. She found out that systems thinking acts as a tool for differentiation. So it actually helped differentiate in the classroom, and she didn't even expect that to happen. So she had language level learners from 3 different scales, and therefore there was a lot of language gaps amongst the students. So she found that at the end, all of their results, it didn't matter where their language was. The systems thinking, actually, the mapping activity that they did helped the students to actually build a language together about a system. And that, in the end, helped them talk about this system in a way that they were comfortable because they agreed on the language together. So it was a really, really interesting finding. And therefore, I was like, okay, so we're pitching your finding to the forum's agenda. So we pitched to the agenda, and they said, yes, this is really cool. Let's put this up on the forum's main site. So we wrote an article that was hosted on the World Economic Forum's main site, not even just the Academy. And then we also put all of the student work up in the student showcase. Now, one step even further. So I was still really interested in this idea of systems thinking being a tool for differentiation. So I passed her along to 2 of my really good friends in education and in academia, which was one at HKU in the Netherlands and another at the University of Galway in Ireland. And I introduced them, and now the 3 of them are writing a journal article. So it's going to be an academic journal article as well. So this is just a brief example of what this collaboration looks like. And even further, now they're creating an innovation lab. As you can see over here, they're building an innovation lab in their school because they have all this extra space, and they're like, why don't we turn it into an innovation lab? And then they're going to run a challenge with us, an innovation challenge, and we're going to host it for them. And then furthermore, they're also looking at building a conference so that they can bring a lot of different schools in the Philippines together to introduce them to what systems thinking is. And then lastly, we just talked, and it's not even on this list yet because it's a little bit more new, but they want to create micro-credentials to host on our platform as well. So that's just an example of what this can look like. So when you look at their lesson plan here, I have all of the resources, supporting materials. They're all linked to. You can see the student testimonials. You could take a look at the report if you want. Coming up, it'll pop up in a second. So this is the report that they created. And so all of this is for all the teachers to explore and look at online. This is all here and ready for you just to download. You could just download it right here, have it for yourself. And also the lesson plans are linked right in here as well. So here's a lesson plan. You could download this as well. And it's, it's a proper lesson plan. So I actually went through this with Loida together and we built it together. As a teacher of 10 years, we're all experts at lesson plan building at this point. So we work, and it's got the learning objectives, the outcomes, long-term, short-term, etc. So you can even download this. So this is an example of just one of our collaborations that we've done so far. And that's what we're looking to do. We're looking to work with more institutions to do something very, very similar. Now,
So that's super cool. Green. I
yeah.
guess my question from listening to this is like, well, they would have been using the strategic intelligence platform, not the academy, because this was pre-academy, right? What would they have done to kind of build this out? Would they have started with the transformation maps and then just kind of explored from there? Or like the lesson plans and the resources you're sharing with educators, it's a great starting point for them to start thinking through what it might look like in their classroom. But imagine they wanted to create something on their own. Like, how would you suggest they start to explore?
I would definitely suggest they explore the transformation maps. That I'll actually pull that up right now because I think the transformation maps are a really, really fun tool, and they're digital and they're interactive, so it really kind of meets the kids where they're at too. So they're looking at all these really complex topics, but from a medium in which they're really familiar and comfortable with. So let me pull that up so that you can see. All right, so
Cool.
this is
And while you're
actually,
doing that,
yeah.
we just got a question or
Oh yeah.
comment actually from a student in the chat. So Ians, I
Hi.
apologize if I'm pronouncing that name wrong, but love to hear it. I'm guessing CT is Connecticut, so happy to have you here. Mentioning that not seeing a lot of this strategic thinking taught in schools. Well, that's why there's a room full of educators here today, Ians. They want to bring that to students just like you, but I appreciate you taking the initiative to be here. And to answer your question, yes, the platform will be accessible to everyone. It's an open platform, open resource. It's a website. Anyone can just go to it right now. And again, we'll share the link. We'll share it in the chat, but also share it in the follow-up of the recording as well, so you guys can start exploring.
Yeah, I'll just put this up too if anybody wants to do it quickly.
Yeah.
So this all started with us basically going to through the Strategic Intelligence Platform, which is a platform which hosts what we call transformation maps. And this is a tool that we used in the classroom. And I'll just pull them up quickly so you can see them and get an idea of what they look like. So this is the Strategic Intelligence Platform. And in the platform, you can look at all sorts of different topics. So one that I really like is I like to look at AI because I think it's very relevant. So let's see, artificial intelligence. And there's if you look right here for Discover, I don't think it tells you how many, but there are over 300 different topics. So you can explore for days and never see them all. And we're creating new ones every day. Now
And
let's
it
look.
has the SDGs like you showed before, which is
Yes.
another great launch pad
Yes.
for schools are very familiar with that.
That's actually a really good point. Maybe I should pull those up instead. So the UN created 17 maps, one for each of the SDGs. So let's look up, why not education, right? So here, we got the education SDG map right here. So one of the things that you can do is you can use this as a tool to have kids explore each of the topics within the greater system. One class I had actually was looking at the maps, and I had them just write down all the things that they thought were surprising about the topic. And they actually found it really fun. They were exploring, they were fiddling around the maps, and they were finding so many things that really shocked them. Like one of the kids realized that there was some sort of connection between the Arctic Ocean and China's manufacturing. So it was really, really interesting, all of these connections that they were pulling from it. Also, let's just see, there's a create map tool. So well, actually, maybe I should just take people through this quickly. So when you look at the maps, the map is basically the center is the topic in which the map is about, the issue. So the issue here is quality education, and all of these little circles on the outside are related issues. So the key issues that are related to this topic, key issues. So key issues in quality education is making sure it's relevant, continuing education, because we know that's something that we struggle with. Is all the education relevant now that we're teaching, right? Gender wage gaps, arts and education. Arts and education is a big one. Gender-based violence, lifelong learning pathways, quality basic and education. So those are what the United Nations identified as the key issues here. And then if you look on the side, there's curated content by each of the institutions. So all of the maps are curated by a research body. So most of them are by universities, like Stanford has their own, Oxford has their own, Trinity, a bunch of different universities, but these ones are specifically from the United Nations. And then whenever you click on one of the key issues, it tells you a little bit more about it right here and its relation to all of these factors that you might not have even realized. So this is where the surprise comes in, because all of a sudden you see that arts in education is actually related to the climate crisis. What? So then you're like, okay, I got to figure out what this connection is, because I have no idea how arts and education is related to the climate crisis. And that's when you can start reading through the information and identifying what that connection means and how it got there. So that's what's really cool about this. A really interesting case study that I've done with students that I would recommend doing for other teachers is this one from, let's see, Unpacking Puerto Rico's Political Status, Crafting an Argumentative Essay. So the students actually used the maps to craft an argumentative essay about whether or not Puerto Rico should stay as they are, or if they should break away completely. So it was really, really interesting. For example, like when they went to the Create Map feature up here, they created their own maps, and their maps have to have descriptions. So their intro paragraph was that center topic. So the main topic, here's your introduction paragraph. And then each of the key issues was a supporting paragraph. So they had to fill in all of that text in the transformation map. So they actually had a digital essay, and it wasn't in a typical essay format. It was in this digital format, but it was an essay. The same exact skills that you would use to write an essay, they were able to integrate into the system. And it was kind of cool because the kids didn't necessarily even realize they were writing essays because it was fun. So that was kind of the fun thing
That's
here. So
cool.
there's all sorts of things you could do with the transformation maps. So, but here's the thing though, just to note, the transformation maps are they're free to use, but to create maps, you do need to have a premium account. I believe it's premium or pro account. Now, that's something that Damien and I have been talking about. And, you know, if anybody is interested in trying to use that tool with their students and just see what they can come up with, there's lessons that exist within the page that I just showed you that are for high school students. One of them is like one of the really good lesson plans that was done in South Korea actually was future skills. What kind of future skills are kids going to need? So the teacher engaged them with the future of learning map, I believe it was. So they started looking and digging through that map to identify skills that they're going to need in their future for their careers. So there's a couple
And
examples that are already there.
yeah, I'm happy you mentioned that, Brian, guys, and we'll share more with you in the follow up to this and in the coming weeks. But our plan was to introduce this to you, and we didn't even mention at the start, but this thing is brand new, right? This thing
Yeah,
officially launched
Friday.
on the 22nd. Yeah, Friday.
Yeah.
So you, for everyone watching this today, are probably among still the first few that have actually kind of had a tour like this of this live platform. So super exciting.
They're the
We wanted
first
you
ones
to
actually outside of the launch on Friday. Yeah, they're the
look
first.
at that. That's the My Blueprint value right there.
It is.
But we wanted to make you guys aware of this, start thinking about it, start exploring, start looking at some of those other lesson plans and resources to get a feel of what it could look like. And then, yeah, our plan is to work with Brianne and her team to figure out how to get you guys premium access to the full version for the first few months of the new year, 2025, so that once you have a better feel for it, if you want to create your own transformation maps, you'll have the ability to do that. And then by working through an idea of what this looks like for you in your classroom, again, have the ability to have your lesson plan or your idea published as a resource for other educators to take advantage of. Everything that we've looked at so far, except for creating the map, will be available in the free version. But if you do want to be able to create your own maps, then you will have the ability to do that as a My Blueprint user. Just stay tuned for more details about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, you know, it's not just about creating lesson plans too. If you've had a lesson plan you've done in the past and you found something really, really interesting that you discovered from it by using systems thinking, talk to me. We can come up with a blog post like
Cool.
this one that it was just, you could see was just released on Thursday. So this one just got sent, but this, we wrote this a few weeks ago. and we're looking for more. You know, there's a need for these articles out there. So we're looking for more. There's articles, podcasts, everything. Student showcase. If you have student work, that's the one I really would love to see. And I didn't even showcase that at all. But the student showcase to me is my favorite part. We have a young girl, for example, Sophia Tibibian. She has created her own company and she's working to fight the climate crisis, one podcast at a time. And she has her own podcast, so you can explore it here, and it's excellent. So these are all kids' work that's being promoted on our site as well. So they do deserve to have their voice heard. So if you have great, exceptional kids and they need a place for their voices, just let me know that as well.
Awesome. Brian, I know one question that will come up from our
Yeah.
community, and Nancy just mentioned it. As a global platform like World Economic Forum, is there support on the site for other languages?
Yep. There's support on the site. I don't know exactly how many languages it's translated in, but we have a team at the forum that makes sure that it's it's translatable. And I think actually one of the lesson plans we have is fully in Spanish. So yeah, it's global. Most of it's in English because the forum does work with English as their core language, but it can be translated.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah, good question.
One other question I have is, and you've kind of touched on it, but what was the impetus, I guess, for the Academy, right? So there's the Academy and there's the platform. And the platform is what we just looked at with the transformation maps. I think really cool launch points for you guys working with students. That already existed. So why create the Academy? Was it to create and house all the different implementation ideas and resources and lesson plans and overviews about concepts like systems thinking geared for the educational audience? Or was there another intention behind why to create the Academy?
Actually, if I go back through it goes back to one of my slides when I think it was here. Yeah. So when I initially worked for the forum, maybe I should just actually tell the story. So
Yeah.
I happened just to be online, exploring online for my literature review for my PhD, because I'm trying to understand how to teach kids about complex systems. And as I was doing my literature review, I happened to come across the transformation maps, which are part of the strategic intelligence platform at the forum. Now, when I saw them, I was just amazed by the amalgamation of data that's collected on there, by all the resources that are so reliable, you know, these institutions that we've all heard of before, and that they've all gotten together to create this resource. And it was incredible to me, the manpower that went into it. So I just couldn't help myself with my giddiness, and I just emailed the forum right away. I sent them an email. This is so cool. I'd love to learn more about it. I'm doing research on this for my PhD. And the next thing you know, I actually got a phone call back from Abhinav Chugh, who I'm still very good friends with and I'm still working with to this day. He sent me an email, excuse me, not a call back, an email 30 minutes later saying, hey, let's have a call. So I went in for the call, and then little did I know that the head of strategic intelligence was joining the call, and we had a really great conversation. And I was so excited about the project, and I think my excitement probably showed because I'm not a very good poker player, as you can tell. And when we were chatting, I was like, well, for my PhD, I have to do a work study. So it'd be really interesting if I could, before I even finish it. He said, when do you want to begin? So that's how I ended up at the strategic intelligence platform as a research fellow, just through that conversation. Now, from there, I wrote the white paper, which I showed earlier, that was published by the forum in July. And that white paper explored how systems thinking can be embedded in education using our transformation maps. Now, this is why it relates to complexity here, though, because right here, the paper is traditional. It's linear, it's static, right? And I just kept on thinking to myself, I can't believe I just wrote a static PDF about systems thinking, which is totally anti-systems thinking in a sense, right? So I went to Stefan, who's the head of strategic intelligence, and I go, can't we turn it into a platform? I collected all these great resources. Like, all these teachers didn't just give me their lesson plans; they gave me their worksheets. They gave me their rubrics. They gave me videos. I'd love to have like an open source platform for people to go and they can see everything, as opposed to just what was in that static white paper. And I want it to be changing and adaptable. And he said yes. So that's what turned into a second year of my fellowship. So the first year was writing excuse me, the first year was writing the white paper. And then the second was focused on building this academy, which stemmed from that white paper. And I probably didn't explain that so well as I was going through the introduction, but that's really how this birthed from the Strategic Intelligence Platform, an academy that birthed from that paper, and it stemmed from Strategic Intelligence Platform itself. Does that make more sense?
Yeah. That makes sense. And I love that story. And like we talked about before, Brian,
Yeah.
but you took action, you followed your curiosity and your interest and your desire, and have developed something really cool along the way that's going to help a lot of people. So we're all very grateful for that. One thing I want to mention, and then guys, just keep an eye on time. If you have any questions, now is the time to throw them in the chat and we can address them with Brianne. Otherwise, we'll wrap up shortly and everyone get back on with their day. But I guess one thing I want to highlight as well, our audience primarily is people working with students within the context of career development and career exploration. But if you have colleagues at your school, guys, like Brianne shared tons of examples already of different use cases across different subjects. And as we've learned with systems thinking, it's about breaking down the silos. So this isn't just something that exists within one class or one subject area, but it's really how everything is connected to each other. So you'll have this recording, share it with your colleagues or your peers, share the platform with them as well. The more use cases, especially we can get coming out of Canada, I think the better. Let's rep Canada on this academy and show them what we're all about. But just want to make sure that everyone aware that this is not just for career exploration, but just let's break down the silos in general.
Breaking down silos, that's huge, Damien. I'm actually, that would be a very, very interesting case study in itself, an interdisciplinary lesson plan, not one that's just from one of the subjects, not one that could be categorized by just one, but one that includes, for example, let's say you want to look, you want history and language arts to go together, right? Because language arts is a lens to history. So that would be a really interesting class to teach together and then explain how putting those two together through the systems thinking mindset really can impact the students' ability to understand the complexities of the time. So that would be a really cool lesson plan. Break down those silos, interdisciplinary work. That is systems thinking at its heart, at its core.
Cool. Yeah. Okay, guys. Do we have any other questions from the community? We've been addressing them as they've come in, Brianne. So if we don't, then I think we'll part ways. I just want to thank you, Brianne, again, on behalf of the entire My Blueprint community, not just for volunteering to kind of share this wonderful resource, but pushing through whatever it is that you're battling right now.
Whatever I have.
It means a lot, and we can all see that this means a lot to you. So I'm excited to see what our community comes up with. I'm excited to see some of the resources that we help create to support them with this. And I'm excited to see what the world looks like in a few years after you've had a bunch more students thinking about how to tackle complex problems using systems thinking. Right? Dean had a great question. So thinking about breaking down the silos, do you feel that the workforce will see less importance on the 4-year degree versus micro-credentials and other education? Oh, that's interesting.
Oh gosh, that's a big question. The answer is I'm not sure. But that's a really interesting question. I think maybe. These traditional education, I think, is going to be changing big time, especially since the world is rapidly evolving, right? One of the things that we just talked about actually at the Strategic Intelligence Outlook event at the forum this past week, where we launched the platform, was that all these companies came in and they started talking about the skills that they want kids having to they started talking about the skills they want students to bring with them when they come to work at their organizations. And the number one skill they all said was AI literacy. And to me, I sat back and I'm like, oh my gosh, I could just imagine how all the teachers in the world are actually sitting there saying, what? That's the number one skill I have to teach my kids. We're not even allowed to use AI in school, right? Most schools have like banned AI from being used. And they said, well, we don't really care if they can write essays anymore. Now, what's important is that they have the ability to think in the way in which they can write an essay. The thinking skills are still important, but that skill in and of itself to write the essay isn't. So they want people with better AI skills and digital competencies. So that was a bit frightening to me. But also it's the world in which we live. So yeah, kind of branch from your question a little bit, Dean, I believe. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that we might see stuff like micro credentials becoming really important and more important than regular ed. I'm not quite sure. But at the same time, skills are constantly going to be changing. And the skills that we need, we're going to have to upskill and learn because we wouldn't have learned them in our own institutions. I think, Damien, I was talking to you earlier saying, like, I didn't know that I was going to have this job that I have today because when I was in high school, I didn't even have the internet. So I would have never
Yeah.
thought I'd be building a platform, right? So that's something that, throughout my own life, I've upskilled myself and I've caught up with the times. So these micro credentials, those are going to be huge because you're going to need to stay on top with the times in order to be hireable.
Yeah, I think that's all a really great point. I would echo that. I would just push back on whether the vehicle is a micro credential or not. At the end of
Right.
the day, what employers want is like they want to see the skills and it's provide proof, right? So that's
Right.
why one of the things we talk a lot about in my blueprint is the value of a portfolio and being able to show and not just tell, right? A
Yes.
micro credential, like any kind of credential, like any kind of piece of paper, is great in so much that you can actually showcase the skills you've developed by earning that thing, right? So for everyone listening, just another plug for my blueprint, get your kids creating portfolios to showcase the evidence of the skills they're developing so they can share that with those future employers or scholarship providers or whatever the case may be.
Yes, because having a badge that says I can do this skill doesn't actually show that you can
Yeah.
do the skill. So that portfolio, I really actually agree with that sentiment a lot, Damien. I think that you're right.
Cool.
It's more about the skills than necessarily it being a micro credential or a master class or something like that, or a Coursera course, whatever it is, right? It's just about having
But
this.
it is, and that's a great segue. Just to remind everybody that this is an amazing platform for students to understand some of the different types of skills and how they overlap and intersect with other skills that are required to solve really complex problems in the world. All right. Thank you, Brian.
Of course. Bye, guys.